Hi, today for my precise presentation, I am going to be discussing Still Alice. I chose it for a variety of reasons. One, it ultimately was my favorite piece that we've read this semester, probably because it wasn't written by a philosopher, if I'm being honest. And another reason was talking about the philosophers that we have talked about this semester. I thought it could really connect into some of the ideas that Julian C. Hughes was discussing in his piece, The Physiology and Psychology of Aging, when he began to discuss about living an authentic life versus living a successful life. Okay, so a little bit of background information on the book without going into too many details about it. We have Alice. She has 3 children, a husband, and she is also a psychology professor at the University of Harvard, or Harvard University, whichever direction that one goes. Important to note that she did go to Harvard for college, and then she did continue to live in Boston and in and around the Harvard area as, obviously as she got older and began as a professor there. So one day she goes for a run and suddenly she doesn't know how to get home. So she goes to the doctor and the doctor puts her through a variety of different tests and ultimately ended up concluding that she had early onset Alzheimer's. And the book goes on and what's interesting about the book is that the reader kind of gets the idea of what it's like to have early Alzheimer's. You're kind of experiencing it with Alice. You're kind of feeling the effects of her not being able to remember things, or her not being able to live the life that she once knew. And I think one of the central ideas of this book is the idea of learning how to cope with life after you're diagnosed with a disease that is 100% life-altering. And I think another main idea of this book is kind of life after life. And by that I mean Alice has one life where she's this totally kick-butt woman and she's a Harvard professor and she's giving all of these awesome psychology notes because she knows so much on the she's giving psychology speeches because she knows so much on the subject and students want to take her courses and she's well respected by her colleagues, and suddenly she can't remember anything and she has to move on to this life where she's not able to do anything on her own like she was living before, and going for runs by herself, and so she moves on to having to go on to runs with other people and be constantly watched. And she has a husband, John. Obviously, they're married. But one thing that's important to note is that they weren't spending a lot of time together because he is also a professor and was spending a lot of time in the lab. So there wasn't much time for them to have together, so they were kind of just seeing each other in passing. So she was living a lot of her life alone. And after the disease, she kind of had to learn how to cope with, after being diagnosed with the disease, rather, she had to learn how to cope with having to have other people help her through life, which is not something that she was used to. Another important note here is that she had 3 children. I think one was very similar to her, had a job, was very successful in her career. But she was about to start a family, which Alice kind of was on the fence about because she didn't know if it would kind of interfere with the daughter's career, and I think Alice was very career-driven. Another daughter moved out to LA, wanted to be an actress. Alice didn't think that this led to a good life. She didn't think anything good could come out of it. So, she was constantly fighting with this daughter. In the end, that daughter is the one who ended up taking the most care of her, in my opinion, and ultimately made Alice see kind of the more important things in life, which is what I'm going to connect back to Julian C. Hughes' idea of living an authentic life versus living a successful life. So you're probably asking yourself, what's an authentic life? What's a successful life? Well, luckily I'm here to kind of point you in the directions. So in a successful life, and the idea of a successful life is that, you're healthy and you're actively aging. you know, you're kind of just doing good by your body. But in the end, this can be, you can end up not aging successfully if you acquire disease. So in all senses, at this point, Alice has not aged successfully. Now, what she has done is aged authentically, because aging authentically means that you're kind of just living life. There's really no right or wrong way to age authentically. It's a very individualistic approach to aging, and nobody can tell you what's right or wrong. So I think that the idea of authentic aging is something that the daughter who lived out in LA kind of brought to Alice's life. She kind of taught her that there's more to life than what we think we should be doing or what we think we know is right. It kind of makes us step back and think, hey, is this really what I want to be doing? Is this what's really making me happy? In the end, is this how I want to be defined? And I think towards the end of the book, when we see Alice kind of spending more time with family, getting to know her family and appreciating them for what they are, and when we see her reading more books because that's what she wants to do, we see her make that transition, and we kind of see her in kind of a way live two happy lives as much as she can. So I think that that's how we connect the chapter 4 by Julian C. Hughes, the physiology and psychology of aging, back to still Alice. Another important thing to note is that Alice had a file on her computer labeled Butterfly, and basically this was a file that she made in a completely healthy mental state, and it had a list of words, and basically whenever she couldn't remember this list of words, she kind of wrote it to herself that, you know, this is when she should kind of overdose and maybe end her life because she doesn't believe that she's living her best life anymore. And the book, I believe, ends with her going to her daughter's play. Yes. All right. So yeah, she's kind of like, she's at her daughter's play. I don't know if she necessarily ever, she never actually decides to open the file, so she never goes through with it. So she clearly finds herself living a better life than she thought maybe that she could have lived with this disease. So in the end, I believe that the two, you know, there's a much bigger purpose to Still Alice than just being a good book. You know, the purpose is explaining to someone that you can live your best life even when you're not living the life you thought you would be living your whole life. So I'm going to leave you on that note, and thank you for listening.